Computer. All right, here we go. Thank you everyone for coming to SAC Interactive. My name is Nolan. Below me on my screen is Bill. He and I are two of the co-managers for the group. The group meets every third Wednesday of the month, usually physically in the Hacker Lab building in downtown Sacramento, but because we live in COVID lockdown times, we're currently meeting on my Zoom channel, doing things this way. It's always free. It's always open to everybody that wants to join. If you have ideas for topics you would like to see presented, please let me know. And if you are a presenter that would like to present something yourself, please let us know as well. If you're not on our mailing list and would like to be, if you'd be so kind as to add your email address into the chat, Bill and I will make sure that's added into our database. I promise not to spam you too much. The topic is something to do with web or mobile development. The actual technology used rotates from month to month. Sometimes it's JavaScript, sometimes it's how to make an iPhone app, sometimes it's this neat CSS trick somebody learned about or whatever. So it's not always, let's say, Angular, but it's, you know, something to do with web and mobile development. And this month we have Eric Rossman here, who's going to tell us about a video game that he's been working on, or actually video games he's been building over the last few years. So with that, I think the floor is yours, my friend. Take it away.
There we go. I'll share my screen here. Just one sec. And are we good to go?
You are all set, sir.
Nice. You see in the presentation. Okay. So I'm Eric. I titled this The Weekend Game Developer because that's what I am. I make video games in my spare time and really jumped into this in 2013 with very little, if at all, prior experience to it. And to give a little bit of background about me, I'm one half of Rossman Bros Games, and this right here, our logo, shows you how long I've been making games, because it's a little outdated because I'm supposed to be that guy on the left who has hair on top of his head. And so that's no longer the issue, but I had it when I started. So this is made up of my brother and I do kind of the design of the game and the code and some of the artwork and stuff. And then my brother does all the difficult talent required non-programmer artwork, as well as and animation and stuff, and the music. And I was telling my brother that I was preparing this talk, and he said, well, the first thing to tell them about making video games is you need to convince someone to make all the art and music for you for free. So I kind of am fortunate that I had a brother that our talents kind of lined up with, and we both grew up playing video games and wanted to jump into this together. But to give some background on the projects we've done, we've completed 3 projects that we published. The first one, unfortunately, no longer on the App Store due to not keeping up with all the requirements and updates and whatnot, but hoping to get a version of that back out there somewhere at some point. But we first made a game called Jump Jack. And the first 2 games we made, coming into it with no kind of experience or anything, I used a tool called Game Salad, which is actually just drag and drop logic, not actually writing code. And then our second game did pretty well, and we wanted to kind of build a bigger, better version of that we ended up getting on the Nintendo Switch and Steam, and that we used Game Maker Studio, and that's where I kind of dove into learning how to code and whatnot. But to give you a little preview of the projects we've worked on, our first game, Jump Jack, was a game. It's auto runner, but not like an endless runner. It's level based. It was for mobile devices, and it was a game about my son saving his baby sister from evil robots. It was my second kid was just born, our daughter, and so yeah, I figured if I'm going to be spending some time doing game development, I might as well involve them so I don't feel as bad about having all this time I'm spending towards something. But that was pretty cool. He's pretty excited to get to say that there's a video game about him. So that was our first project, and the kind of some of the response we got from that encouraged us to do a second project, which our second project was called Get Me Out of Here. And it is kind of a fast-paced action arena, like with waves of enemies, shooter about a little bald farmer guy. My brother and I wanted a character we could relate to, so we made this little bald guy. And it's about this guy who gets abducted by aliens, wakes up on their ship, manages to get his hands on one of their guns, and then has to fight his way through waves of enemies and bosses. And we tried to go kind of funny with it. It's got some voice acting and some silliness, right? There is a cow boss that the aliens abducted your own farm animals and weaponized them to pit them against you. So we have a cow with machine gun udders and stuff in it. But I really like games like Dark Souls and like really fast with a lot of dodging and rolling, and so that's kind of what this was about. And also, I forgot to note, feel free to chime in with questions or anything at any point. I appreciate that. But so those are the games that we've worked on. This one first came out with a mobile version, and then I rebuilt the game, made it bigger and better with more levels and stuff for Nintendo Switch and Steam. And so kind of what were we able to accomplish with this? And the first one, we were not able to accomplish turning this into a career or anything like that, or having some significant financial income. So if you were hopping on hoping to find out something like that, you can feel free to sign off if you were looking for some advice on how to make money making video games. But what we were able to accomplish, which I think is pretty cool, is one, just a really awesome hobby and endeavor and kind of fulfillment of a childhood dream of making video games, as well as creating experiences that really we saw players love and building relationships with people across the world. And I think if you look at those, I think that those are pretty cool goals to have in kind of any pursuit that we have. That I think that's a pretty good reason to go for any hobby that you have. One, because you enjoy doing it. You have fun doing it. It's kind of that, I think as a kid, I always had these creative outlets, making videos, doing different stuff. And then when I had kids and I was busier, it was just, I went a long time without having that until I finally said, hey, I want to jump into doing something. I want to make games. And so I think that that's just good for us to have something like that. But then also I think it's a pretty cool goal to go into it with, and I want to make something that people play and like, and I get to have their feedback and see them experience it. So I think that bottom one is kind of one of the coolest things that I've got to experience in making games. We managed to get our games, our Get Me Out of Here specifically, reviewed by some major mobile gaming websites, by Touch Arcade, that gave us a good review and also gave us Game of the Week. And we got a good review from Pocket Gamer. And so those things that were pretty cool. But I'd say even beyond that, some of the coolest things is just the Let's Plays that people have made of our game, even if it's from people with small followings, just getting to see that. Some of the fans that I have connections with on Twitter and stuff. One of my publishers at one point sent me a drawing that a kid from Burma had done of our cow boss, and he wrote Bessie on the top of it. That's the name of the boss. And it was it was kind of exciting for me because it was on notebook paper with the lines on it, and it just reminded me of when I was a little kid drawing the different characters that I like. And so that's what makes this worth it to me, is when I think of how video games, all the different memories of like certain games and aspects of them that have stood out to me in growing up, and the fact that some of the things I've made might have those kind of similar things for other people is pretty cool. And so with that, sorry, here we, so what I want to share today, in light of that is kind of what have I learned through these 3 different projects and through my failures and successes in them. And my goal in that is to encourage others to see their projects through to completion, and to both enjoy the process of making games or apps or whatever it is, as well as creating things that other people enjoy and other people use. Because I'm sure many of you know, any kind of development, whether it's game or app development, or if it's just a music project, whatever it is, even though we can really enjoy it, it can also be really difficult, and it can be really challenging. And so I just wanted to share some of the things that I've found that brought me more joy in the process of it, and also helped me make stuff that other people enjoy, which adds to my enjoyment of the whole process, and has been a huge motivator in me to want to keep doing it, and keep up at it. So that's what I want to share. But a little disclaimer is that I am going to share things that really, I believe, worked for me, and I think that they're helpful for all others. But I also, but they're not hard set rules for anyone, I think, to follow. I think sometimes other people's experiences, if it doesn't really line up with our strengths, it can kind of sometimes make us feel counted out of pursuing something. But really, these are just things that I've found just helpful, and kind of different difficulties I ran into in the development process. And so the first thing I want to say, though, is that if you have a desire if you have some sort of project, if you have a desire to make games, is to just start making them. That's really, I had for years this kind of desire in my head to make a video game, and I never got closer to it until one day I just said, hey, I'm going to make a video game, and just actually went for it. That there wasn't like this building up of I got these skills or something that I learned. The jump jack that I shared was the first project I ever started in a game development system. And I know not everyone learns that way. Some people like doing smaller projects and stuff, but I'd say the biggest way towards anything you're pursuing is to just make it and just go for it. Sometimes the best way to learn it is by making the thing that you want to make. And so I have a few different things that I want to share that have been helpful for me. And again, feel free to jump in with any questions or input or thoughts on these. But the first thing that I'd say that I've learned, that really both of our 2 big projects have come out of, is try to make games that fill a need. And really this could apply to multiple different things, but something I found is asking, where do you find yourself saying, why aren't there more games like this? Why aren't there more things like this? And this is something that I think has really helped us to be successful in those goals that I mentioned, the ways that we have been successful in such a saturated market where there's thousands of games coming out every week, and it's hard to get noticed, hard to get people to play them. That all the projects we've made came out of the question, why aren't there more games like this? And I think that this leads to you making a project that you're passionate about, because it's something you want, that you wish existed. And I think that it's also something that is more likely to appeal to an audience that has the same desires as you. And so to kind of give my story on how this happened for me, my first game came out of before I got into game development. I was iPhones and gaming were kind of new. It was just right around when phones became powerful enough to run cool games and not just like solitaire or something like that. Not saying solitaire is not cool. I like solitaire, but this game called Kid Trip, I downloaded, and I found out later it was made by one guy. And I think I saw an article for it on IGN, and I was like, okay, I'll download that. And it was an auto runner, so not an endless runner, which the App Store was full of at that time, but an auto runner with levels. So it had an end. You would kind of master that level and then move on to the next one, and then there was an end to the game. And it brought it was like super difficult. I think it kept a death count for you. I think I had like 800 deaths after my first playthrough of, I think, like 15 or 20 levels of it. But I remember just playing that and loving the challenge in it. It kind of brought back a lot of those memories that I had in games as a kid. And I kind of just played the heck out of it, where I got to where I could beat the whole game without dying, and just loved it and got into it. And it was so different than all the kind of easy, more casual games that were on the App Store at the time. And I remember kind of when I'd played as much of it as I could, I went to search. I was like, man, I want more games like this. I did. I was playing a lot on my phone then because I always had it with me, and I couldn't find much like it, if anything, that was like this game. And that was kind of what I had this in the back of my head all the time of, hey, I want to make a video game. And then I was put in a place of, I want a game like this on my phone, and this is the only one. Even though there's millions of games on the App Store, I can't find more like this one. And so that's where I jumped into our game Jump Jack, which was very similar to this game with some new mechanics. I actually reached out to this developer, and he gave me some advice and play tested a little bit for us. And I think what we came out with was we hit kind of that audience where when we released it, we're kind of like, okay, maybe our friends will buy it, we'll see what happens. But we ended up getting some coverage on a few websites, and Touch Arcade actually did cover our first game, and we had more. We, based on the sales, even though they weren't huge, it was more than just our friends and having people write us and stuff. And these were some of the kind of receptions we got. That this person wrote, it'll have you on the edge of your seat, sweaty palmed and cursing at the screen. If you grew up throwing your video game controller, sorry, your guys' faces are in the way. If you grew up throwing your video game controller at the screen when you died, you know what I'm talking about. For fans of classic action arcade platformers will love it. And really that, I think, really played out well for us, of going for something of, hey, this is what I want, and there's not a lot out there. And from that, we hit a crowd of people that were like, oh, this is great. I haven't played a lot of games like it, and who love. I had random friends from high school who I hadn't talked to in forever. It was like, oh, I saw your game on Facebook and I got all the stars and all this stuff. And really, it wasn't a game that was for everyone. It was really difficult, really challenging, but I think that was actually to our advantage, because there's thousands of games that come out every week that are for everyone. But we made a game that was for a very specific group of people, and that worked out well for us. And then Get Me Out of Here, which was our game that actually, where we got Game of the Week. We had a publisher that we worked with to help us get a bunch of downloads. It was free at first when we first released it, and then I rebuilt it for the Nintendo Switch. And I would say that version is by far the best version that we have. That if I were to tell someone to play my game, I'd want them to play it on the Switch, where they can use the controllers. There's more levels. It's built in a better engine with all these features and different things. But the version that we received the most love on was our mobile version that came out a couple of years. That's the one we got a bunch of good reviews on, a bunch of downloads, a bunch of people reaching out to us. I still to this day, I was looking at it and thought it was kind of cool that we still have a 5-star rating on the App Store on it, which I think is cool for a game that was free at one point and just anyone could download it and review it. But the reason why I would say that one was more successful for us was because we built that one with the desire to make a game that kind of had console style controls on a mobile device. That when we look at the App Store, it's full of a lot of platformers, but most of them are kind of slower paced with like a virtual D-pad or something like that, and a couple of buttons on there. And because you can't mimic everything that you can do on a controller, with just on-screen buttons. But I, playing mobile games for a long time, had kind of always played these games and kind of had a desire of, oh, I think developers could do more. Rather than using on-screen buttons, I think that they could do more actions to bring out some of the similar type of gameplay that you get on consoles. And so I mentioned earlier that this game's really fast-paced. It has a lot of dodging and rolling and jumping and shooting and different things going on. And so we built it where you had a joystick on the left hand, and then on your right hand you would hold down to shoot, but then all the other motions were swipe motions. So you would swipe up to jump, you would swipe right or left to dodge right or left, and swipe down to drop from platforms. And what that made was we were actually able to create a game that ran really smoothly, but was really fast paced, but you could keep up with it on the controls if the controls jive with you. And that was kind of a risky move for us, because not a lot of people do that kind of on mobile. It's usually release stuff that's really easy to understand right away, where on consoles you might have a game where you got to get used to the controls, but people are used to that. But the result was we actually had quite a few people who loved it, and even some people messaging me like, oh, this is one of the best games on mobile, because they didn't have a lot of stuff like that. They didn't have a lot of options like that. And to kind of give an example of the response we got, here's a quote from Pocket Gamer where they said, "Get Me Out of Here is a shooter that's a little more complex than your average arcade blast. It might look simple, but there's actually a complex control system to get to grips with here. This is one of those games that's worth sticking with. It might be a little rough to begin with, but once everything starts to fizz and bubble, you'll find your scores creeping up and your enjoyment growing." And that was kind of the response that we got. And if you go and if you would look at like our game and the reviews we got, and you looked at the comments, it's kind of full of these mixed, split down the middle of some people saying, oh, I couldn't understand this game, I couldn't grasp the controls, and then other people saying, oh, the controls are perfect, this game's awesome, I'm addicted to it. And I think the reason why we got such a big reception in that way, and we got Game of the Week on some of these sites and some good reviews, was because we made something that was different but filled a need that I was looking for, that it turned out other people were looking for. And that was kind of risky for us, but again, it was a risk that I think paid off for us, in that the people who did want that kind of game, it really appealed to. And so that's kind of, I'd say the one of the big things that I've learned in game development is trying, with how saturated the market is, asking those questions of what do I want that doesn't exist right now. And actually, that's why looking at my next games that I want to make for consoles or stuff like that, I'm looking at, man, what do I find myself going through the Nintendo Switch for and never finding games like, for example, me and my friends like to get together and do like 8-player couch multiplayer battle games. There's stuff like Smash Bros and stuff, but sometimes we run out of stuff on there, and those stuff are harder to come across. And so that's kind of some of the projects that I've been working on, is stuff like that. And so that's something that I've just found is asking that question, what do I wish was out there? What kind of games do I wish existed? Second thing that I've found helpful, and this I would say would be kind of my biggest advice I'd give to anyone developing video games or starting their first project, or who's been developing games for a while, is involve others in the process as early as possible and as much as possible. And really, I'd say that this is something I did not do well on my first project. And I'd say that this is the biggest thing that led to my second project being something that I loved making, and had a great response afterwards. Because if I look at kind of what we did, if I look at my first game that I released, I kind of just made the whole game, and then right at the end had a handful of people play test it for me and tell me what they thought. And really, there was a lot of downsides that came with that. And one I would say is that project is the smallest project that I've made, but it's the longest project that it took me to complete. And I'd say that that's because I had a lot of breaks in there where I was kind of just going crazy, being the only person looking at this game and the only person playing it, and would just kind of take a break from it and not be that excited about it. And then the other thing was, we made that game and got to the end, and then we started having people play it and realized it was too difficult. And to kind of give some thoughts on that, if that game that I talked about that inspired my first game that I made, not only did I learn how to beat that game without dying, but I actually got first place on the like the world leaderboard on the App Store on there. And then I went to make a game like that I was the only one playing the levels all the time. And so they seemed like a good balance to me, but I never had anyone else play them very much. And then we got there and I watched people play it, and just kind of watching with like this tense like frustration of, oh, come on, you can beat the level or this or that, and just seeing people struggle with it. And so that kind of led to us having to, from the end of the project, work backwards and kind of just force in a difficulty level that wasn't designed from the beginning and wasn't integrated through the whole process. And it worked. As I shared, we still had people who loved and enjoyed the game, but it wasn't nearly what it could have been. And so with my second game, we tested from the very beginning. Some of the fans that we gained from our first game, I sent a test build of the prototype just when I had the controls made for Get Me Out of Here, and kind of just did a few weeks of sending builds back and forth just before I even started making the game, beyond just the controls, and adding to that. We had a development log on the Touch Arcade upcoming games forums, where I posted screenshots or animated GIFs regularly that people would look at and give their feedback towards. And that was a huge, just like encouragement and kind of an excitement of, I want to keep making stuff that I can post and share and get people's feedback from. We went to some different game development meetups, which is why I think it's really cool that this group meets every week to look at different things, but also to share projects with each other and stuff. And one of the coolest ones was this picture on the right of my brother and I at a local Comic Con, not as big as the really cool Comic Cons, but it was still pretty fun. And they had an indie game convention within the Comic Con, and we got a booth there where we could have our game. And I would just I had my laptop hooked up to the monitor, and so I could just sit on the other side of the table and watch people play the game all day. And that was one, I'd say, that sitting and watching people play your game or use your app, whatever it is, throughout, from as early on and then throughout the entire process, is probably the greatest thing you can do as a developer. And I'd say that that's really what made our game into something that people really loved and enjoyed. I remember actually the first night after the convention, I went home and fixed a bunch of stuff that people kept running into, getting to see, oh, that wasn't as obvious as it should have been. So then I could come back and see how they respond to the changes and stuff. And so that was huge. I always had the most recent build of the game on my phone, so that when I was hanging out with people or friends talking to them about my game, I could just hand it to them and watch them play it. And then at the end, we did some larger scale beta testing, inviting in a larger group with a lot of questions to ask them. But I would say that really was what made development extremely fun and extremely just rewarding, of kind of involving others through the whole process, being able to morph the game into what people really wanted and what really worked well with people throughout the whole process. And it ended. It made it more fun for me in the process, and it made the end result so much better than our first project that we had come out. And one of the best, I wish I could have found the video that I got this from, but I can't remember the person. Oh, I think I skipped over it. But what the best advice, or one of the best pieces of advice that I got from watching someone's game dev video, was this idea of, if you can make this part of your game fun, which if you think about it, most 2D games are something like this, just with sprites and stuff on top of them. If this part of your game is fun, that you can make within the first week or so of development, then the end result's going to be fun. And so this was this is a recreation, because I couldn't find the screenshots of my original test builds, but this is pretty much what I sent to people and said, hey, how do these controls work? And I just had these pink blobs coming at people, and you could dodge by them and roll by them and shoot them. And I just spent a couple weeks sending this back to people and tuning into the controls to where they said, yep, that clicks. That works perfect for me. And so that would be, I'd say, the biggest thing I've learned in game development is don't develop in isolation. And I think that we have so many tools for ourselves in this. We have meetups like this. Game jams are a big thing people participate in now. We have Discord, Reddit, different forums and communities. Twitter is a big, has a big game development following in different hashtags where you can get just feedback from other people as well as friends. That I would say that would be the number one thing I would ask people to take away from any advice that I can give in game development. Moving on, 2 more points, but the next 2 are shorter. The third point, and this is what that guy who made Kid Trip, this was the advice he gave me when I first reached out to him and sent him a build of the game I'd been working on. Yeah, I hope he didn't think I was too creepy, saying, hey, your game made me want to make a video game. But reached out to this guy, and the advice he gave me was to take a month or so at the end of development to really polish the game. And I think that this idea goes back to, if you think of that screenshot I just shared a few slides ago of kind of just all those blocks and what a game is behind the curtains. If you can make that fun, how much more fun is it going to be when you have your animations, you have a screen shake in there, you have good sound effects and all these different things going on that really add to your game. And I was actually listening to another developer talk on this, and he talked about how in this process you should really lean on your strengths. That a lot of us programmers are known for something called programmer art, and so if art's not your skill set, using coding tricks, to do different kinds of transitions or movements or even animations of sprites getting bigger, smaller, or things coming in just to add to the style and to the feel of the game. If art is your strength, just spending as much time as you can adding details in that way, that there's a lot of different ways you can just add detail. And this would be true of all projects that we work on, of polishing up the UI, the user experience there to add to the code and the game and the foundation of what we've built upon. And my favorite resource in this, I don't know if any of you have ever heard of the game studio Vlambeer. I think they're the game that I know they're most famous for is a game called Super Crate Box, but I know they have a handful of them that are pretty big on consoles and stuff. But this was a talk from back in 2013. I believe that it was originally called Adding Feel to Your Game, but then he changed it to The Art of Screen Shake. But this is something, that's the title from YouTube. I just copied and pasted it there. So searching that on YouTube would bring it up for you. But this is it's like a half-hour presentation, and it's where he just takes he actually uses Game Maker Studio, the same tool that I've been using, and he made a game project where it just starts out with this little guy running around and some enemies coming at him, and he just slowly starts, he has a button that keeps just adding different things that he added to the game, features that he added to the game that don't change the game a whole lot, but make it feel so much better. And and look so much better and be more fun to play. And one of my favorite examples that he gives in it, he talks about it was a really big game development studio making some first person shooter. I can't remember who he was talking about, but it was a story a developer shared where they presented this new weapon to the producers or whoever was in charge of the game, and the producers told him, it just doesn't feel right, it doesn't look right, you need to go and make it better. And they walked back, and the programmer just went in and he turned up the bass on the whatever it was like a rocket launcher or something, and they brought it back and the guys played it and they're like, oh yeah, this is perfect. That's what we were looking for. And just how those little things, he has all these different kinds of screen shake or making the explosions bigger, and actually in both games that I've made, I've gone at the end and watched that video just to come up with ideas. Okay, how can I make this feel better? How can I add the details and stuff to this game that my testers have already been playing and already feels really good, already plays and is fun, just to make it feel that much better. And that's where my brother and I, we tried to make our game kind of funny and goofy. And so we did stuff like adding in voice acting and cutscenes and all this stuff. And it was actually, as I was preparing this presentation, I was searching for some of our old Let's Plays to put a screenshot up of, and I found one that I had never found before, of these two guys playing our game and talking to each other and just having fun. I sent it to my brother and we were loving it, but I love the guy's comment he made was, or our favorite line out of it from the guys commenting on our game was, the voice acting's so bad but it's so good. And we took that as a compliment. We loved it. But just those little things that add character to your project, make your project more memorable and really engage people. I mean, that's what makes, I think, our for my brother and I, so fun to go and watch other people playing our game, is their response to the details of our game and seeing them enjoy it and light up. And that's actually my last point on here, is when you make something, ask people to use it and ask people to play it. That with how many people make games, it's not a, hey, if we build it and put it out there, they'll play it, is what I found. But I've found that people, when we really enter into their world as well, and it's not just a mass email getting sent out, robot to everyone, but actually watching, finding people whose YouTube videos we like and sharing what we like about them. Hey, would you play my game on them? That's some of the ways we got coverage on some of the big websites is I got involved in their forums and their communities, and that caused us to get noticed on there. But this screenshot right here is of a guy who is playing Switch games on YouTube and a bunch of Mario Maker levels, actually. And I just loved his animation and how excited he was about everything. And I reached out to him and said, hey, would you play our game? And that was his response to the boss cow coming out, which is one of my favorite parts. Usually when I find someone playing our game, I sometimes fast forward to that part and then go back and watch the rest of the thing. But really, I would say that I don't know if I'd still be making video games if I didn't reach out and put myself out there and asking people to play them. And I think that's one of the coolest things that developers have now is YouTube and Twitch, because we get to see people play our games. Otherwise it'd just be out there, and I'd maybe have some reviews on the App Store, different stuff like that, but to actually get to see people use what you've made and enjoy it and have fun with it is, I think, a pretty cool thing. And it's worth it. I think a lot of people sometimes just ask the people who have millions of views to play their stuff. But I think it's pretty awesome just to go, if someone's out there making content, to support them and them support you and go out and build those connections and ask them to use your stuff. And that's where I've found some of my most rewarding experiences in game development is those that I can go and rewatch and stuff. So with that is my presentation. Open for questions. And also I put my email at the bottom there for anyone who ever wants to reach out to me or ask me anything about my games or game development.
Hats off for making a game in Game Salad. That's pretty intense.
So that's funny that a lot of people haven't heard of Game Salad. And the funny thing is, so yeah, I picked that tool because I had no idea what I was going for. And it kind of got a bad rap at one point because it was kind of, a lot of people would just buy templates and then put them out on the App Store. And where it actually was a pretty cool tool that you could do a lot with. And it was funny because in the Touch Arcade weekly podcast they were talking about our game because it was the week it came out, and it got in game of the week, and I loved it because one of the writers said to the other guy, "Hey, guess what? This is a Game Salad game." and he's like, "I can't believe these guys made this thing in Game Salad." So it's funny that you mentioned that. No bash on Game Salad. They actually, I think they've become more of an educational tool now, and kind of.
Yeah, I think it's one of those ones, like I'm always looking for like the latest greatest thing that's like a balance between drag and drop but with some of the power of actual code. And Game Salad is one of those ones where like it's super easy to get into and make like basic movement and prototyping, but once you start adding complexity to it, like you're stacking these pieces on top of pieces on top of pieces, and like it becomes a mess to keep track of. So yeah, hats off for that.
That's where I actually found now that I understand Game Maker, I can though it was a little bit of a bigger learning curve, I can actually make games quicker in it than I could using Game Salad for that very reason.
How long did it take you to make this first game in Game Salad, Eric? Rough guess.
So that Jump Jack game, that was 2 years, but with multiple months of not working on it mixed in throughout there.
And then what about Get Me Out of Here?
Yeah, so Jump Jack was finished in September of 2015, and then I took about a month break, but then from just kind of some of the fans and asking us, "Hey, are you going to make another game?" It kind of gave us that motivation, and it was my brother and I actually sitting out on my back porch, just started talking. We started talking about a guy getting abducted by aliens, and then he was like, his cow should fight him. And so that was probably in November of 2015. And then we released that in April of 2017. So again, with some breaks in there, working on it, but doing it all in our free time and whatnot. So that's more of a year and a half and that was for a much bigger project the second time around.
What made you switch from, you used Game Maker and Get Me Out of Here, right? What made
on
you switch?
The rebuild of it, the rebuild, which is on for the Switch and stuff.
So what made you switch from Game Salad to Game Maker?
So that one was Game Salad's mainly an iPhone game making system. It you can get stuff out on PC and stuff by using an HTML5 wrapper and stuff. So not really ideal for that. And we kind of said, hey, we're because it got such a good reception on mobile and on the websites and stuff, I just wanted it to exist on consoles and a more permanent version and stuff, with Apple often changing stuff and apps going away because of that. And just wanted to learn a more complex engine. So I thought a great way to learn would be taking the art assets and everything I already have, and rebuilding the game and adding to it in that.
Is there anything from any of the games that you learned, like that you would share as a lesson learned for people making games? Like, oh, don't do it that way. That cost us 6 months of time, or this thing we thought would be cool, but all the reviewers hated it, or does anything jump out as?
Because alongside that point with Jump Jack that I said, we didn't test significantly at all throughout the process, which was a huge bummer in that, just because, once it's made, it's so hard to go back and change it, and so that was a big one. But then when we got a publisher, they wanted to localize, and I didn't program it to be localized. I think I had all the text blurbs just in the code, rather than hooked up to a variable that could be changed or something like. So kind of planning ahead and things like that, and leaving because that's not a whole lot of extra work added in, but it's something that if you end up deciding to do it, you can do it. But then the other thing I'd say in the opposite direction is there's a lot of features I spent a long time on that I don't know if anyone ever played. Like maybe one or two, like a bonus area if you beat this and stuff. And that's where I think scope is the big, like, make the game you want to make, but as small as you can make it. Decide how small can I get it to where it's still something I'm excited about and I want to make. And I mean, those things can always be added late. Jump Jack, we had enough people saying, hey, I want another level pack, that we actually made an in-app purchase level pack later on. But making all those at the beginning, I don't know if people are going to want them or not. And so that's I'd say a big mistake. Was there's probably a lot of stuff I spent a lot of time on that maybe 2% of the players actually took advantage of and used and enjoyed and didn't add a whole lot, to the overall experience.
Gotcha.
Just curious, how did you said that there was some, months where you weren't working on the project? How did you get back on it? And did you ever have any struggles where you're like, I don't want to finish, like negative thoughts that are just not constructive, where you're like, you get frustrated, I'm never going to finish this, it's dumb, nobody's going to want it, that kind of thing? How did you get through those?
So going back to how I had hair at the beginning of the project, with especially those games I was taking a lot of breaks in, I was a lot younger back then and my memory was a lot better. Now I've learned the importance of putting in notes in my code and all that kind of stuff. So that was always a struggle of, during those big breaks that I would take. It's kind of, you come back and it's, sometimes I'd start working on things that I realized, I already did that. I already finished it here. It's in the code over there. And so that was always a drawback, where I found notes help you, because you don't know when a crazy month's going to come up that you can't work on your game. And so setting yourself up for that. But then, yes, to that second question you asked is, I remember, especially when I was the only one playing the game, feeling like this is, you just get it where it becomes so old to you that that you're like, this game's, it's horrible. Why that you feel like that at moments. And that's where I'd say having those play testers and community and people just seeing screenshots excited about it was a huge thing that helped me battle that. But then the other thing is sometimes those breaks helped with that, where it's kind of, so even though the break makes it hard to come back and get into it, I think it's dangerous taking a break because you might never come back to it. But I think it can be good to take a break with telling yourself, I'm going to come back to this. I'm going to see it out and kind of come back to it with a fresh perspective, where so I think sometimes taking a few weeks break makes you miss it a little bit. And you come back to it with kind of a renewed excitement for it and stuff. So, but yeah, it's difficult because I guess my answer was kind of both sides of that, of taking a break's difficult, but can also be good in battling that. But I think having people play the game and then be excited about it with you is huge for that.
Did you schedule it all? Did I get the feeling that, well, for me, I'm usually one of those people that tries to keep everything in my head. And like in the last 5 years, I've learned using a calendar is really helpful. So I was curious if that helped you at all, or something that you enhance upon as you made more games.
Yep. I think what you just described, it would be similar of what I'm feeling right now, where one, I have started a new job since I was making my last game, so my schedule is different anyway. So I think I'm in a place in life where it would be helpful for me to say, hey, I'm going to devote this time to my passion of making video games, these hours on the weekend and stuff. And there's kind of goals in that, that helps keep you on it. Where before it was definitely just, you can get into some dangerous habits of staying up till 3 a.m. working on your game, especially when you have kids and everything. There's times where I had to be like, oh, can't do that anymore. So that was, I'd say on my first 2 projects that was a struggle, just because I just thought, oh, this is a hobby, just like I do anything. I don't schedule my hobbies, and I think when you have a hobby that's an endeavor like this, you want to treat it like a hobby and kind of how you would a job of you have a schedule and you want to hit goals and different things like that. So yeah,
kind of related to that, when I've had projects before that I want to work on, I've read this article a while ago about a guy who was working on an open source app, and he was struggling with, similar to like what you're talking about, with he'd take breaks and have a hard time getting back into it sometimes, depending on what the mindset was at that point in time. And he'd have a mobile app he's working on and think, okay, tonight I'm going to work on my mobile app after work and get a lot of progress done on it. And that night he'd be tired from his day job, and then he'd say, okay, this weekend I'm going to work on it a whole bunch this weekend. And the weekend would come and his wife would have stuff he needed to do and the kids would have soccer practice and whatever. So he wouldn't get anything done then. So what he found worked was he decided, I'm going to work on my mobile app every day. Even if it's only 30 minutes a day, I can find a 30-minute window in a day that's even a super crazy one. I can turn off, the reruns on TV at night for a half an hour or whatever and just focus on my app for 30 minutes. And then what he found was those gaps are not there anymore. He's getting regular, consistent work done on the app every day. And since he never had to remember back 4, 5, 6 weeks earlier, he just has to remember yesterday. He was always able to hit the ground running on those half-hour chunks and get going on whatever the next thing was to work on in the app. And he found he was able to get his app done in much fewer calendar days than he thought he was going to beforehand. And I've used that same process before to finish songs for my band or projects I'm working on of different sorts as well, and find that kind of thing works really well for staying on top of it. Even if, like, in Eric's case, he's got a couple of kids and a new job and whatever, like, for me, that works generally when I have a project to do. Like, yes, life is crazy right now. I can find a half an hour though to do something on the app today to move it forward a little bit. And I get value out of doing that kind of thing with it.
I like that.
That definitely makes a lot of sense. I bet even if you promise to do like 5 or 10 minutes a day, that 5 or 10 minutes will end up being at least a half an hour.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. And that's where you run into the trap though too. Like Eric talked about, of staying up until 3 a.m. when you've got other stuff to do. You gotta like make sure you don't go overboard on the days that you can't go overboard. But if you can just get a quality half hour in on it, that itself will move things forward in very noticeable chunks. Even though 30 minutes doesn't sound like a lot of time, it really does add up quickly over a week or 2 or 5 or however long your project is. A friend of mine wrote and published her first book in 30 minutes a day a couple of years ago.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Huh.
Eric,
awesome.
You mentioned not localizing your game and how they wanted to ship it in different languages and you couldn't do that.
We did do it. I just had to rewrite a lot of code.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. I worked on a game once where we did that, and we ran into a situation where this is kind of an anecdote for you, where just translating the text broke the game because it was a puzzle game.
Oh, man.
And in one of the puzzles, you had to make a balloon animal in the shape of a person, a famous poet smoking a pipe. So you could have a silhouette of a person smoking a pipe. And the puzzle was like, make me a balloon animal shaped like Robert Frost. And everyone in the US knows who Robert Frost is. He's the famous poet who smokes a pipe. When the game got translated into like Italian, they had no idea who Robert Frost was in Italy. And even in the UK, when the game came out over there, people in Europe were like, we have no idea who Robert Frost is. So that part of the text had to be changed to like Winston Churchill and Mussolini and whoever the famous people were that smoked pipes to make it work over there. It's kind of, you run into weird stuff like that sometimes when you localize your games that you wouldn't even think of beforehand.
That's pretty good.
Any other questions, anyone?
I'm just curious, what do you think of the Game Maker Studio being bought out by the Opera web browser? And the rumors, I guess, are that there at some point there might be a free version. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I'm just learning that right now from you. When did that happen?
A month or two ago.
Oh wow! See, that's
Opera GX or whatever is the browser that supposedly is for games. So people are thinking that at least, there might be a free version where if your target platform is that browser.
Huh. Could be cool. I just hope it doesn't change the engine too much.
That's interesting. I hadn't heard that either. Eric, do you have an all-time favorite video game?
Well, I have categories. Like I have my favorite all-time video game, but then I have my favorite all-time non-Nintendo video game, because then it's just not fair. Because my son gets mad at me regularly because he really wants my favorite all-time video game to be Minecraft, and he's frustrated that it's not. But because it is Mario Brothers 3, and that's where I think there's a lot of those older games that just like as a kid they made me feel like, oh, these are magical. Like you get the leaf, and then all of a sudden you have raccoon tail and stuff, and so that game's always stuck with me. But then in one of my most favorite recent games was Horizon Zero Dawn. That's a big kind of open world game that came out on the PS4 that was pretty cool. But yeah, I mean, I could just keep going on. I like Street Fighter, Mega Man. Do you have a favorite all-time video game?
I do. Mine's Burger Time. That hands down, that is, I can play Burger Time.
Is
for
that an
hours.
arcade game?
It is an arcade game, and it also came out on the Intellivision. I think there's a version of it for 8-bit Nintendo and a couple of other platforms as well. I first kind of grew to love it on the Intellivision, which I've got in a box behind me that I should hook up one of these days if it still works. And that was just. Are you familiar with that game, Eric?
I've seen screenshots of it and stuff.
Okay.
What's the premise of it?
You play a chef who runs around these platforms of like ladders and platforms you run around, and the platforms have different layers of things you would use to make a sandwich. So you have like the bun and the patty and the lettuce and the tomato and then the top bun, and as you run across each of them, the layers will like drop down to the bottom part of the screen, and they stack up and they build full hamburgers as you do that. Yeah. So, and while you're running around trying to do that, there are hot dogs and eggs that are like chasing you around the screen too, and you have to kind of avoid them like the monsters in Pac-Man. You can't kill them, but you can throw pepper at them, and it sort of stuns the egg or the hot dog or whatever, so you can run past them without getting beaten up. And we got it in television when I was, I don't know, 10, something like that, and I just fell in love with that game. And to this day, it's my favorite thing ever to play, that thing. They've got one at the Santa Cruz Boardwalk. They've got the classic stand-up version of it. And anytime I'm at the boardwalk, I'll go and bring, a handful of quarters and just sit there and sink them in there and play Burger Time for a good hour or so and feel better about my place in the world.
That makes my current, if you look on my Nintendo Switch, and you can log the hours of games you played, and the game that I was terrible at as a kid, but now I've got addicted to, that has the highest hours I think of any game on my Switch, is Dr. Mario. And I finally got to where I can beat it on the highest difficulty on the highest speed, which I used to say was impossible, and prove myself wrong there.
Supposedly any feature on a game that has shipped, especially for consoles like that, has been tested and completed successfully by somebody in QA. Like, there used to be a rule that if you've got a feature in a game, it's got to be playable that way. Like if you have an ultra slow setting or a super ultra fast setting, the game has got to be beatable with that turned on or off, whatever it is. So if it's there, somebody should have, somebody in QA got through it.
Did.
Allegedly.
Yeah.
Which leads to like dangerous. You know, you're talking about balancing and polishing and tuning. It's like, you know, one of the things as you tune something, you got to be careful not to make it harder and harder and harder. And one of the other things is like when you work with people like those, some of those QA testers that can just do things with controllers that like you're like, what the heck? You know, he jiggles it, you know, takes a penny and jiggles the thing across the thing, and that your character like wiggles his way out of the world and things like that. Like, how am I supposed to fix that? How am I supposed to anticipate that?
Yeah.
Wow.
I remember the QA teams I used to work with. You'd come into work on Monday and say, "What did you do this week?" And they'd say, "Oh, I beat some crazy complicated game." Like, "Oh, how long have you been playing that?" "Oh, I just started it this weekend." How are you doing? Like, we play games for a living. We're good at it. And they'd know how to, yeah, rip through.
Their thumbs were conditioned.
Whatever game. Exactly. The thumbs were conditioned. They had the ultra high-end controllers. They knew every trick. They knew how the games work. You know.
Yeah, there are people, you know, that are like good at games and generally good at, you know, you can practice and become, you know, better than the average game. And then there's the people that break games.
Yep.
They're so good. They just attack them.
See, that's what me and my friend always have an argument about, is if someone's using a glitch to get the speed run, are they better than at that game than the other guy? And where I think you need to beat it the way it was intended to be beat. But he disagreed with me.
That's an interesting question.
Yeah, because there's a lot of things. The speed runs on Quake Done Quick was one of the things that first popularized that thing. And some of the stuff they do is, I mean, throw out a grenade and then shoot a rocket jump off the exploding grenade and just fly through the air to the other end of the level and beat the level in 15 seconds. It's crazy.
That's what my son does. He watches YouTube videos of people playing weird Mario Maker stuff, and then he makes these levels that he loves, laughing at me that I can't beat, and then he goes and does all these weird tricks that he found from YouTube.
Wow.
Kids, man.
I just
Yep.
want to +1 all the games you guys have listed. I feel very at home with this. What is it? Mega Man, Mario 3, Burger Time, Street Fighter. Yeah, the talk about finding the shortcuts in the game was just, for the first time, I'm imagining a QA tester working at a game development company who has discovered some shortcut to skip a level, but isn't reporting it to anyone because he wants to be able to get his work done really quick during the day.
I've never heard of a QA tester actually doing that, for whatever it's
No,
worth.
me either.
To be fair, I was just listing games that are where's it? There's Mega Man right there.
Oh,
Mario.
nice. Just describing your decor.
Yep.
Cool.
But they're there because they are my favorite games.
Most of the QA testers I know would do some weird thing to break the game, so then you know, raise the roof height a little bit and do some level design adjustments. And like, I can't do it, you know, and so they give it back to them, then he sends it back to you 15 minutes later, you can still do it. So you're like, make some more changes. And after some certain point, you're just like, okay, we're not going to be able, it's so hard to do right now that we're going to ship it with that feature in there. Eliminate it.
The one that blew my mind, I don't know if any of you have seen that people are able to recode Super Mario World for the SNES within the game there's a certain glitch where you got to go and you kick a turtle shell up or something, and then it's like you can move, and when you jump or something like that, it changes characters within the code, and they do it for hours and they've coded their own games within it. It's,
oh my God.
There are
blows my
several, a
mind.
lot of the older consoles from like that, the 8-bit kind of era stuff has weird tricks like that in it that you can do because of how there was only so much memory on those cartridges to store things, and they had to cram the code literally right next to the graphics in the same section of RAM. So if you can just get a graphic to move kind of out of bounds into where the code section of the cartridge is, you can do that and get it to like manipulate how things work. There was a kind of a famous one in the original Super Mario Brothers called the minus world, where if you could like jump over a certain pipe and go down a thing, it would go into this world, and it'd do the same transition screen where it would show you now playing level. Usually it was like 1.1 or 1.2 for Mario Brothers. It would say playing level -1, and it would jump you into a level that didn't actually exist. And it was because of that's what happened. Your character literally flew into a section of the microchip in the cartridge that didn't actually have a real level in it, but it was stuff that got kind of shoehorned in there to make the game work, and somehow became a level that the developers never actually built. It was just a side effect of how things are physically on the chip.
I've always been, my mind's been blown by it, and that's the first time I ever had somewhat of an understanding was your explanation right there.
There's an explanation of it. I don't remember if it's a YouTube video or if it's a really good blog post. I'll find it and send you the link, but there's somebody that wrote out, here's why the minus world in Mario Brothers is actually a thing. And it's not a developer created Easter egg. It's not like a password you type in to get a cheat code value.
That's
crazy. It's a totally side effect of just how Nintendo cartridges were made back then.
I wish the bugs in my code failed that gracefully. Oh, it's a new feature.
You and me both.
For free.
Sometimes you do get kind of fun features like that as side effects of your code as it's going through things. We had I worked on a game called Sim Park, and you could basically build you build a wildlife park in it with animals and plants and things that has like a food ecosystem and a food tree, and see which animals eat the plants and then which other animals eat the smaller animals, and so on is how the game works. And there was a part of it where you could build paths to walk on for humans could walk around in your park, and you could build bodies of water so that you could have fish and stuff in your park too. You could build basically wooden bridges to go over the top of the water. It's like you can walk from one side of the lake to the other if you wanted to. And because of how the objects in the code inherited from each other, if you built a walking path on dirt and just kept going over the top of the water, it would instantly turn into the bridge tiles to make a bridge over the top of the water instead of being a dirt path on top of the water, which would make no sense. And that was totally not intentional by the developers. I remember being in the room with them when they're going like, oh, hey, I think we have a feature in the game. Look at this. It makes a little bridge for you. I had no idea it would do that. And the producer came in and looked at it, and her jaw dropped, and she went, oh, that's a feature. Ship it. And okay, it looks like we were geniuses, but it was just a side effect.
I was gonna say that's probably. I wonder if that's one of the things that you listed in that video, where like sometimes that's how you find the fun of a game.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Any other questions for Eric before we wrap it up?
How much did you can you disclose your financial earnings on the different titles, or just vague if you want to?
So we with our most successfully that first release of Get Me Out of Here being the one that was the most successful reception wise and everything, we made that one free to play, but not one. I never went really into the science behind free to play. I just stuck some ads in there and then an in-app purchase to take the ads off. And so we did make a couple $1,000s on it, which I think someone with some strategy and some, hey, do these analytics, and you get people addicted right here, and those kind of things, which isn't like what I was going for or anything at all in there. So we've, I found it to be a hobby that at least pays for itself as far as things I need to purchase and licenses for game engines and stuff like that, but has been unfortunate, which in talking to other developers and stuff, I know some people that I've talked to who really put in the grind and the research and have made it something they can do as a job, but they're kind of just making it every game in that and stuff. But it's, from a lot of developers I talk to, it's tough, to make income out there. yeah, so it's always been kind of like, oh, a little discouraging in people love the game, but it doesn't bring us much money, but so but then I've seen people making similar kind of games as us that make one and get a bit lucky, and it takes off and is a little more successful and stuff. So
Hey, 2,000, a couple grand is nothing to sneeze at, man. I know people that, probably spent, similar amount of time as you did that, maybe they make $200 or $500 or something.
Yeah.
Like that.
And that was more our first game, that Jump Jack game that was, I mean, if you look at the art on Jump Jack, that was when my brother was just learning pixel art and stuff. And just overall, you can tell it's not up there as the quality of our other games. But that one, we just sold for $1 on the App Store, and that and it only did like 400 or 500 sales, but even that was kind of encouraging in the sense of, oh, that's more than I know that's more than just my friends buying it, and so that was and then my biggest thing is I just want people playing the game, and so like with our first game, we would have weekends where we just put it for free, and all the sites that do the sales would get it. We'd get like 10 or 20,000 downloads that weekend or something, and so just the fact that people were playing it, and then kind of similar on Switch is as I mentioned, it doesn't really stick out on the Switch because there's so much stuff like that on there. But we have a publisher who will do a lot of really cheap sales, and that's when they don't really bring us much money, but at least it's getting out there and people are playing it and stuff. So
have you thought of doing something else other than platformer?
Yes, I have. It's one of those where I have so many different ideas. It's like, which one gets my time? Which right now the one I'm working on is, and actually I've kind of been where when I started my new job, I kind of took a break on it, but it was right at the beginning of COVID where I worked on it. I was able to sink some real hours into it because I wasn't able to go to the job that I had and all this stuff. And that one is along the lines of what I was talking about, kind of a 1 to 2 up to 8 players battle where it's kind of like a platformer, but it's around a planet. And so you got all these little space guys flying around the planet, and there's gravity that pulls them out and trying to shoot each other out there and stuff. And so different than the other stuff I've made, but still kind of, I guess it doesn't control like a platformer, but it's similar to a platformer.
I wonder if there's some sort of, well, there definitely are some things, where a platformer is easier to complete because you don't have to worry about, oblique angles from like a top down kind of thing.
Yep. You don't have to make angles of your character walking every direction and stuff like that.
Collisions and things like that are much simpler. So I wonder if it's just that it's just easier to, it's not only easier to develop, but it's easier to make a complete product.
Yeah. That's and just kind of the action oriented part of platformers is you can have a game that's replayable with not needing a ton of content within it, where like most like a top-down adventure game or something, that's going to be a lot of time put into it and stuff. But yeah, I think that and that's just kind of my brother and I, one of our favorite genres of video games.
Any other questions, folks? No. All right. Well, Eric, thank you very much. That was awesome, man. I'll get the video posted onto YouTube as soon as we can, and we'll put links down in the description of that to point people towards where they can play your games and that sort of thing too.
Awesome.
And,
very much enjoyed it, and nice meeting all of you.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot. Nice meeting you too. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Have a good night,
Eric.
everyone.
I'll have to keep an eye on the topics you guys have come up.
we'd love to have you come back too if you want to talk
Yeah.
more about your games on another meeting.
Someday.
All right, done and done. Anytime. You're always welcome. Thanks, everyone.